Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Martin Dowling. I'm Senior Lecturer in the University of Aberdeen Business School. Welcome to this, the third in our series of In Conversations with events, where on the first Wednesday of each month, the Business School hosts conversations with business leaders, innovators and experts on topics such as sustainability, responsible enterprise and entrepreneurship. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our guest today, mindset coach Dee Bleakley, who's going to share with us his ideas about three truths and a lie concerning motivation. An intriguing topic, Dee. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to the many students, alumni, executives and colleagues who are joining us remotely today. We'd encourage you to join us in the conversation by posing any questions you might have in the Q&A tab on your screen. I should also add that the event today is being recorded. Dee, thanks for joining us, and perhaps we could start by inviting you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how your interest in coaching developed.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. It's a pleasure for me to be here this morning, so thanks for having me on. So to give you a little bit of a background on myself, my name is Dee, and before, if anyone is wondering, that is a nickname. It's a nickname I was given when I was about 5 or 6, and it just stuck. If anyone is curious, it's David, but it's one of those things that when I get called David, I always feel like I'm in trouble, like when your mum calls you by your name. So yeah, I'm originally from Belfast, Northern Ireland. I moved over to Scotland as a teen. I went through university here, and then quickly found myself in a full-time teaching position. I used to teach geography, and really how my career kind of took a turn was when I realised in my early 20s as a high school teacher that my real passion wasn't actually talking to young people about geography, as much as I do find that very interesting. Talking about rivers and glaciers and how the world works does interest me, but my real passion when I was in school was actually talking to young people about all the things they wanted to do when they left school. And I just found myself in this position where I was engaging in other conversations with pupils on those things. And that, through a series of events, led to me doing bigger and bigger groups talking about life in general and how to get the most from your school experience. And through a number of years, I ended up working as a I guess a motivational speaker is my official job title now.
So how did the school interest, how did the students, the pupils take that? Did they see it as an alternative to geography like you did?
Yeah, I had to be careful because pupils are very good at distracting teachers, and sometimes they would know if I can get them on a different topic, he might stop talking about the subject. But no, basically I would have done it to kind of build rapport with pupils in and around sort of class time, and I always involve myself in a lot of extracurricular activities, and that's another really good way of engaging pupils in conversations that are maybe not subject related. But eventually there was a bit of a buzz in the school I was working at about Mr. Bleakley's talks that he does, and I used to have lots of quotes and motivational things on the wall. And that just kind of led to the school saying, like, would you take a larger group, a year group? And that kind of led to an assembly. And then I really ended up then taking a shift away from teaching to pursue that career a little bit more, because I discovered it was something I really enjoyed, I was very passionate about, but also it allowed me to work with a much larger group, an audience, out with that school and working at a more national level. And I picked up some work with a motivational training company, and that was really allowed me to get those core skills of speaking on stage, and from there then decided to branch out again and really do my own talks on things that are a little bit more congruent with my own beliefs.
Mm-hmm. And so I take it that the idea of speaking in a motivational sense was very different to speaking in a classroom sense, but the sort of preparation for the two must have been similar in some way. You're both talking to audiences, shall we say?
Definitely. When you're engaging in any, it doesn't matter. For me, as soon as you start to speak to a group that's larger than 2 or 3 people, and you're addressing a group, then those core skills are embedded. And so, don't get me wrong, a group of 100 or 200 or 500 is a little bit more nerve-wracking than maybe a group of 30. But the core skills that I picked up from teaching definitely aided me in my motivational and speaking, event speaking.
Okay, that's really interesting background. I think the way in which you prepare for a class as a lecturer, you prepare, you're going to be on stage, you've got to say certain things properly and so on. And I suppose there must be a certain carryover, as you were saying there, between teaching and speaking as a motivational speaker.
Definitely, there's huge crossovers, and it's always interesting to look back. I always talk, sometimes I do careers events, and I very much talk to pupils about how, when you're in school, and the same for university, just involve yourself in as much as possible, because you never know further down the line where those skills may lead. And
okay.
I certainly never would have imagined when I started teaching that I would end up doing what I'm doing now. And I always just view it like a backpack. You just do like lots of different skills, try different things, and somewhere down the line someone might ask you to do something, and guess what, maybe it was 5, 10, 15 years ago you actually did something similar, and you can draw on that experience.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Well, what else shaped your early life, do you think, in apart from the school and the experience of moving into coaching? What else shaped you at the time, do you think?
It is really interesting, because, as I said, you never know the path that you're on, but it's interesting, when you look back, and one of the things I got asked to do a while ago now was to kind of sum up my life in 5 key events, which is something that I think I would encourage everyone to do. If you can look back on your life so far and go, what are the 5 most crucial, or the 5 biggest things or crossroad moments that have happened to me, then you can pull out a lot from that. And if I go back really, into some of my earliest memories, this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but I remember I was a big Thomas the Tank Engine fan. And I used to have the VHSs of the old video. I used to have a couple of episodes that I really enjoyed. And I remember one of my earliest memories, there was an episode about a train that got stuck and had to persevere and kind of keep trying. And there was even like this kind of music that played. And I think from the age of 4 or 5, I've always had this thing where I've enjoyed the kind of idea of persevering, putting in effort, trying really hard. And that led me into, my early school days. If it was I used to play in the school football team. I used to love to lead by example. If I found that other teammates weren't performing, I used to try to lead by example. And my kind of path through school, I always kind of seen myself as someone that could encourage, someone that could inspire, someone that could motivate. I know this maybe sounds a bit cheesy or a bit daft, but it just, when you look back, I think I've always had a little spark for wanting to encourage or help people. And that, alongside with, in my teenage years, I ended up playing a lot of table tennis, to the point where I played nationally for Northern Ireland. And there was a couple of key things that happened in my time in the sport. And I'm talking about a sport where you're dedicating, 12 to 16 hours a week. So you're training 2, 3, 4 times a week. And I discovered very quickly at the age of about 14 or 15 that the secret to really any success is just putting in lots of time and effort. And I know that sounds common sense, but common sense isn't always common practice. We know these things, but we don't always act on them. And I think even, again, looking back as a teen, discovering that, at a younger age, just instantly, well, if I want to get better at this subject in school, right, put more time in. If I want to get better at, it didn't matter if it was like Mario Kart or Wii Sports, just put more time in and you'll get there. So that did me no harm as well, because obviously as careers changed, then it gave me the ability to know that, look, if there's something I need to work on, just put in lots of time and effort and I'll get there.
That's really interesting. How do you decide, things that you put an interest in, or you have an interest for, you put the perseverance in? What about things that you maybe don't like so much? How do you manage to get yourself doing something there, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of self-motivation, it's something that we all struggle with. And I'd be lying if I said, well, for a living, I give people advice on how to stay motivated. So I'm the most motivated person in the world. It's not the case. And as humans, we're all going to have ups and downs. For myself, if there's things that I need to do and I'm not really in the right frame of mind, I do, I read quite a lot. And I remember a while back reading about how everybody has what the author called an inner warrior. I can't even remember the name of the book. These little ideas have just stuck in there. But it was about an inner warrior or some sort of inner critic that in those moments where you're finding it difficult or tough has the ability to spur you on and sort of, it is just self-talk. And for whatever reason, and this is not my advice to everybody, but what works for me is if I'm finding myself complaining about a situation or struggling with a situation or maybe wanting to, like when things get tough, your brain can very quickly sometimes want an excuse to give up. For some reason, this little kind of inner warrior, whatever you want to call it, inside me just tells me to shut up. And that literally is my self-talk a lot of the time. I know that can sound a bit harsh and maybe doesn't work for everybody, but for me, it's kind of like, just shut up and get on with it. And I just have to listen to that little voice to tell me to get on with it. And that, for me, seems to work.
So that leads it into the area of what motivates you. You've addressed the issue to some extent already. Yeah. But what else would you say motivates you as a motivational speaker?
Yeah, definitely. For me, other than telling myself to shut up, that's really motivational. No, what helps me as well is definitely setting yourself targets and deadlines. I know that sounds really basic, and it's maybe something a lot of people know already, but I can't. If you have something in mind, don't just keep telling yourself you'll do it. Tomorrow is this wonderful place where everything's going to get done. It's about going, right, let's start tomorrow, sure, but when's it going to be finished? And really set those targets. It doesn't matter if it's a fitness challenge or maybe a work. You're looking for a promotion or you're wanting to have something learned in for a certain point. Always set those targets, and even more so, write them down, stick them in your wall, stick them by your mirror. I think I read that targets are 30% more likely to happen if they're physically written down and not just put in your head. Mm-hmm. For me, target setting is really key.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. It's an easy thing to say, isn't it? Just keep a list together, but motivating yourself to return to that list and do as we were saying earlier, do the things that you maybe not always want to do.
Yeah, definitely do the big things first. Don't do the thing that we can write a to-do list and tick off all the easy ones first. I always tackle the big ones first, but that's why it's so important to have them displayed somewhere. So don't just write them down in a book and then throw the book in the cupboard. I have in my office space lots of big charts and posters and targets and all the rest of it for all sorts of things, not just business related. So it's really important that they're in your sight all the time, just to remind you, remember what your some part of today should help towards this goal.
Okay, and moving beyond that, what else do you think is important in motivating others? Or if you were a line manager or a team leader, how does that translate? The individual workers may not have their own lists, but they still need motivating.
Again, lead by example, and I think persevering. If you were to be working with other people, leading by example, but also persevering in your conversations with those people. Everyone, people are motivated by different things, and so what works for me may work for lots of people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And one of the things that I always encourage people to do is find out what works best for you, and if it works, regardless if it works for other people or not, you should keep doing that thing. I've always had a line with my events and my event speaking that I don't tend to do the quote unquote typical motivational speaker thing, which I know, like I love motivational speakers and there's some great ones out there, but a lot of them have an attitude of, this is the way you got to do it, and if you do these things then you'll be successful and blah blah blah. I've always had an attitude, and maybe this comes from more of my teaching background, that for me it's a case of showing people their options, giving people an idea of the different ways they could do things, and then leave them to make a choice. Because ultimately, things are much more likely to happen if you personally made the choice to set those things out and do them, rather than just listen to someone else tell you. I think again, statistics on that to show that if someone within themselves motivates themselves, and that's kind of what I try to do, get people to self-motivate. Because once you've self-motivated, it's like a dog with a bone. You can't get enough. You'll keep persevering, because it's all about those little. That's why people get kind of sometimes quite addicted to things like the gym, because you can see that little bit of progress, week by week or month by month. And once you can get that kind of habit, you can see a huge difference within the course of weeks, months, and then eventually years.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So how do you run a session, where you have people with you for a certain length of time, and you may be as part of the agenda getting them to do things they may not want to do, sitting at a desk and they're having to sort of speak with strangers and engage in some awkward conversation perhaps, and then report on it, maybe to present to the whole group. How do you persuade people to do that?
I try to, it sounds maybe a bit negative, I try to kind of poke people's perceptions of themselves a little bit, and maybe pull out some flaws. So a really quick thing I do is I always ask people, put your hand up if you believe that if at first you don't succeed, you would try again. And I can tell you now, 99% of people in the room will put their hand up and agree with that. People like to think of themselves, I'm a positive person, I take chances, I try things until they work. And so I dropped in at the start, and then maybe halfway through the talk, I'll give them a challenge, something that they can try. And actually, a difficult enough challenge. And you discovered very quickly that over half the audience, when given a challenge, won't try again. They'll just maybe try it once and then think, oh, I can't do that. So it's very easy to show people, like, you may think of yourself a certain way. I think we all have sometimes a highlighted or enhanced view of ourselves. But actually, if you break down what you're doing and your action, that doesn't always align with how you talk about yourself. So it's really important that we get those two things in line, so that we do don't just, the line I like to use is that it's great to think positively, but we have to act positively. So not just thinking positively, but taking that positive action and taking it a step further.
Yeah, some really interesting ideas there about the application of motivation to the workplace, or to a meeting with your colleagues. Presumably the same sort of thing can happen at a team meeting where you have disagreements and so on.
Definitely. And I think, in terms of how we've all been working from home at the minute, that's comes with challenges. And yes, for those that are now wondering as well, how on earth have I done any sort of event speaking over the last 18 months? The fact is I haven't really. I've had to adapt. I've done some online things like this. I've done a few study skill sessions for students. But really I've had to adapt as well. And what I did was I used the safety net of teaching, which had my degree in the bag, and I picked up some work in a local high school. And really, I didn't go back to geography teaching. I went back to teaching, and I worked in the pupil support department, so working one-to-one with students on a daily basis. And that's been brilliant, because it's allowed me to get a really on the kind of ground level again, and see what pupils are going through and experiencing. But that's meant that over lockdown, I've had to do the Teams thing and work in groups, and really it's been a challenge for everybody. It's a new way of learning, a new way of working. But I think, again, in terms of Teams meetings, it's all about staying open-minded and trying to make sure that people are working as a group and not as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Do you, talking about the return to work, a lot of discussion in the media and within other circles about the changes to the way we work today. Do you think there's a lot of issues to do with motivation when we encourage people to go back to the office? Maybe they don't want to go back to the office.
Yeah.
How would you address that sort of issue?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because you talk to different people, you get different answers. I've got friends who absolutely don't want to go back to the office. They're very happy now to remote work, and other people that can't wait to go back to the office because they can't stand being in the house anymore. So it's going to be quite difficult, I think, for businesses or organizations to find that balance. It's really down to the individual, I think, in terms of what they make of it. Personally, I had a little bit of experience because I set my own business up, and that gave me a chance to, I guess, practice in a way, turning some of my home space into my workspace. And there are little things that I found that, as I spoke to some teachers who were for the first time remote working, little tips and tricks that I employed and discovered kind of by accident, or through mistakes that I'd made, found what worked for me. And environment is huge. If you're struggling to work from your bedroom, it's probably because I'm guessing you could be working from your bed. And of course, your brain is just going to associate that with tiredness, with sleep. That's the facts where we rest. So it's really important that if you don't have an office space, even to set up an office space in your bedroom, if you can, try to sit upright, Even like I always put like a little casual shirt on. Again, as soon as you put on a pair of tracksuit bottoms or a hoodie or whatever's comfortable, your brain just goes into that relaxation mode. So I found, your environment was huge. Even the type of music that you listen to. I think that if you just listen to your favorite music all day, it's not really productive. I think I tend to listen to some more ambient music, things without lyrics, things that kind of chill you out and allow your brain to get creative.
Okay, some really interesting points there about the return to the nature of work, or the sort of work we were always doing before this, the lockdown and so on. Moving on, have you taken any risks, Dees, or what sort of risks have you taken in becoming a mindset coach compared to the fairly, stable and predictable routine of being a teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. The risk involved in leaving teaching was huge, and I kind of view that moment in my life. I didn't just jump away from teaching. I did kind of drop my days a little bit. It wasn't like a one career jump to the other. I lowered my days until I was fully ready to take the leap. But it's interesting. What I found very interesting was your friends and family around you and what they say. I think you do have encouragers and enablers that you have that feeling that you should just go for it. But I give you an example. My mum, I love my mum, but she was not a big fan of me moving away from teaching. To her, I had this, again, as you said, a safe, a secure, a job where you have good holidays and salary. Why would you want to leave that? And I understand that from her point of view, she was just looking at what was for best for me and didn't want me to take too many risks. But I think you have to just listen. I know this is, again, quite cliched. You have to listen to your gut. And for me, I love taking risks, and it's both career-wise, but personally as well. It's all about how you look back on it in 10 or 15 years' time. If I had took a shot at business and it didn't work out, as long as I knew I'd give it as much time and effort as I could, I'd always look back on it and go, well, you know what, it didn't work out, but at least I gave it a go. At least I gave it a shot. Whereas if I didn't give it my best shot, or I didn't even try it, then in 10, 15 years, I'd look back and go, oh, I wonder if I had tried that business idea. I wonder if I had left this teaching job and went out. I always knew there would have been a day where I could have been in the job 10, 15 years and looked out my window and thought, I wonder if I had all those years ago taken a stab at that event speaking stuff, how that would have panned out. And that regret, or even that feeling of the unknown, would have kind of haunted me a little bit. So I very much think, what's the worst that can happen? Give it a go and kind of dive into things. And I've also noticed in my life that the more you do that, the more you take risks, the easier the risks become, to the point where I sometimes take risks on things that my friends and family think I'm crazy, but to me it seems kind of normal, because I've got that experience of knowing, well, if I try this thing, it'll probably work out, and if it doesn't, big deal, I'll move on.
It's interesting that the relationship between risk and motivation then. One can say that, well, I'll be motivated to do this, but there's also a downside to it. Possibly there's a risk.
Fear can completely inhibit people. Fear is something that it's real, but it is that leap of faith. It's taking that jump and having, we all have that feeling sometimes, a little bit of fire in the belly, and you think, oh, this is great, let's go for it. But then that for some people, that feeling, that fire in the belly, can be so fleeting. It can be something that we just experience for maybe a couple of minutes, or maybe a couple of hours, maybe a day or two, and then it subsides. It's about how to keep that little fire in your gut burning, and keep reassuring yourself that you can do this and you should. And this again comes back to self-talk. We're all quite quick to, and again, this is maybe a British thing as well. We can be quite quick in the UK, I think, to put ourselves off or put ourselves down, or tell ourselves that we can't. And it's about changing that, and just have that constant little person in your head telling you, what, go for it. Why not? You can.
I think, it's really interesting that the relationship, you might say, between risk and perseverance and motivation, they all seem to be sort of linked together, don't they?
Yeah, and I know earlier I had talked about, this idea of putting in time and effort. But really, I changed that because I realized it's not just effort. It has to be effective effort. It has to be a calculated, kind of measured effort to understand and plot your course, you know, and try to figure out, like, I'm putting the time in, what's the best way and use of my time to make sure that whatever the goal is you're looking towards is going to be achievable. And it is, like I said, target setting. Have a big goal, have a big idea of what you want for your life in 5 or 10 years time. And once you've got that, the big goal doesn't have to be too specific either. I think as long as you generally know what direction you have to go in, spend the next few steps trying to get in that general direction and see where it leads you. And if it goes off into a tangent, then why not explore that tangent and see where it leads.
So there's a lot of elements there that you've spoken about that enable people to maintain a focus on their activities. We've mentioned risk, we've mentioned perseverance and determination and a gut feeling. Anything else you would add to help people keep focused?
I think, now this is going into, again, maybe work from home. I know that it's been difficult for a lot of people. I think it's so important to have a structure in your day to make sure that you're not just in the same room all day. So absolutely, in terms of staying focused, I mean, there's really physiological things that you put in your body as well, like coffee, for example. I learned a while ago, if you want to stay really sharp in the morning, to have a black coffee. I didn't even like coffee, or never mind black coffee, but I kind of taught myself to have a black coffee in the morning because you get a better kick from it without the milk and the sugar. And so that can set you up well, but also within your day, I think it's really important to get out, whether it's for a walk, whether it's for a run. Maybe it's even just giving yourself a bit of time on your phone, or maybe playing a game, but doing something to break up your day. And people say to me, for every hour you work, you should give yourself a 20-minute break. Again, I think it's really up to the individual. For me, what's key is yourself those breaks, but see if you find yourself in a real flow. And we all know what that feeling is. That it's kind of the expression, time flies when you're having fun, but I know work isn't always fun. But when your brain's so engaged in a task, if you're in that flow, then just stay there as long as possible. Do not at that point think, well, I'm in flow, but I've done an hour, so I should really take 10 minutes off. If you're in flow, your brain or your body wants to keep working at that pace, so just let it. And I always think that it's just a case of managing yourself. And I know through conversations I've had with people working from home, a lot of people have found it difficult. And I think how I've spoken to some people, and this includes family members, it's okay to have a bad day or two. I think what's a worry is if someone came to me and said, it's been 3 or 4 weeks now and I just can't get out of this rut. That for me then becomes more worrying. But if you have a bad day or two, as long as you can look back and go, okay, that was a bad day, or that was a bad couple of days, I now need to push on. That's the main thing. It's having that ability to go, you're going to have bad days. That's natural. We all have bad days. It's just making sure that it doesn't become a repeated habit, and it becomes a day or two that you think, okay, I've hit rock bottom. Let's push on now.
Okay, that's really interesting, because there's a lot of students joining us today, as you'll appreciate, and I suppose looking at motivation to be a student and motivation to be an individual in a workplace or in your family life is a bit different. What sort of principles might you encourage the students that are with us today to take back to the desk or their study space?
Yeah, and this is something that I've felt for students an awful lot, because to have to go through university life in these conditions, and hopefully we're now nearing the end of these conditions. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been. I know that from working from home and working remotely, I think a lot of those things I've talked about will still apply. So trying to find an office space even within your bedroom if it needs be. Trying to not work clothes that are too comfortable. Give yourself a structure, give yourself a routine, and really just have what works best for you. I discovered at university I work better at night. I'm a bit of a night owl, so for me to work to 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning worked great, and that's fine. If that's how your day operates, and you can work in that way, then do that. It's not so much the case in the working world. Obviously, we kind of stick more to the 9 to 5, but it's so key to find out what works best for you. And if you do figure out what works well for you, don't just ignore it. Take a note of it, and doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody, but certainly take a mental note of it and see if it works again, repeat it, and see if you can find success that way.
That's great. Thanks very much, Dee, for that. Just one last question. We've all picked up, I think, more than 3 truths about motivation for what you've been saying. What about the lie?
I'm okay. A little technique. This is maybe working smart, not hard. A little thing that I do, which is technically a lie, and I don't know why I'm telling you this. I've just that I'm very much a night owl, and as much as I now fit into the working world 9 to 5, I'm still naturally, I feel this night owl in me. And one of the things I discovered when I started my own business was that I would maybe get up at maybe 9:30, and then have my coffee, get started, maybe send an email to someone at 10 o'clock, and that person would reply by 12 or 1 o'clock. I would maybe get back to them, and then that was kind of the day over. And one of the things I like to do is, because I'm up to 1 or 2 in the morning most nights and find myself quite awake at that time, is I basically draft my emails and schedule send for about sort of 7:45 or 8 a.m. So I'm still in my bed sleeping. That person will get I'm super productive and very early morning riser, and that means when I get up at like 9:30, I usually have a response. So I get an extra email in and get a few more responses throughout the day, because I can reply upon awakening as opposed to early bird gets worm kind of.
Yeah, well, I think we'd call that a bit of a white lie, but anyway. Dee, I'm afraid I must draw our conversation to a close, but thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us today. Thanks also to our audience, and we look forward to welcoming you back on the 4th of August, when at our next In Conversation event we'll hear from Graham McWilliam about the ultimate endorsement, the Royal Seal of Approval. But meanwhile, our thanks once again to our speaker today, Dee Bleakley. Goodbye, everyone, and have a great motivating day.